All right, guys. We are going to get started. I want to thank you guys for sharing some time with us today to talk a little bit about what Iowa State is doing, and in particular with their Live-In Advisor program. Today we have three individuals, and I'll let you guys introduce yourself here in a moment with us to just talk to us about the successes that they're having, how they got to this point, where they've come from. So I'm excited to be able to share your guys' stories with some other triangles who may find this beneficial for what they're working on. I'm going to start with a question for all of us, and we'll go in the order of Dave, then Trevor, and then Tyler. My first question is if you can just explain a little bit about the role that each of you play in this team.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Dave Schwickerath. I'm the Alumni Corporation Alumni Board President of the Iowa State chapter of Triangle. As president, I'm responsible for to the alumni organization. They're actually the shareholders of our house corporation, and I'm responsible for the overall operation of the chapter house. The house corporation owns the chapter at Iowa State, and it's a brotherhood, obviously, but we do operate a business, and income must exceed our expenses at least slightly, and that's the goal. And a lot goes into supporting the chapter and their successful operation. The other thing that I would mention is I consider myself the Chief Alumni Engagement Officer. So one of the key things that I do is focus on the identification of alumni that we haven't talked to in years, and get their current information, and then get them into one or more of the activities that the alumni are involved in.
Great. Thank you, Dave.
Sure.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Trevor Holland. I serve as the Live-In Advisor to the Iowa State Triangle chapter. So what that means is I work mostly with undergrads and kind of serve as a liaison in a way to the House Corporation and Alumni Board, kind of offering that boots on the ground support in that 24-hour kind of 2 a.m. Somebody needs something, we'll figure that out, and then attend most regular meetings and things like that.
Great. Thank you. And last but surely not least, Tyler.
Hello, I'm Tyler. I'm the chapter president. That basically means is that I do a variety of things as an undergraduate student. First and foremost, I am a student, but I also run the chapter meetings. I oversee the executive team. I help offer guidance with them to oversee their cabinet teams. I also attend all of IFC delegate meetings, and I do work with the alumni board.
Great. Thank you, guys. So this next part, we're going to dig a little bit into each of you as an individual. We want to know your story. So Trevor, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ultimately ended up in the role that you're in now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out at Ball State University, and I got involved in sorority and fraternity through my own chapter. I'm a member of Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity, and served a couple terms on the Interfraternity Council, which I really enjoyed and really kind of found my passion for fraternity at that level. And so after I graduated from Ball State in 2018, I joined the Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity staff as an educational leadership consultant. So in that capacity, I traveled in different regions of the country, visiting chapters for anywhere between 2 and 3 days, and thought, how can I continue to work with undergraduate students? How can I continue to advance sorority and fraternity? And so I interviewed at Iowa State to join the Student Affairs Master's program. And so now I am a graduate student at Iowa State. I also have a position as a graduate advisor in the Office of Sorority and Fraternity Engagement here at Iowa State, and serve as Live-In Advisor in Triangle. So I'm kind of double dipping here at Iowa State. I work in sorority and fraternity, and I advise a few of the councils in our office and a few other organizations, and then work closely with Triangle and as a Live-In Advisor in that capacity.
Thank you, Trevor. I love a good consultant story, as I was a consultant as well. Dave, we're going to go over to you next.
Okay.
Can you share a little bit about your role as the alumni chapter president, how long you've been engaged with Triangle, just a little bit more about your story?
Sure, be happy to. So I was initiated in 1968 and graduated from Iowa State in 1971. And as I was thinking about preparing today, I realized that that was 50 years ago that I graduated. So I don't want to be that old, but unfortunately, you can't change that. So, like many alumni, I was really not engaged that much with Triangle or the alumni organization until about 5 or 6 years ago. We had a reunion that I went back for and a 50-year celebration, and attended an alumni meeting and a football game in 2018. And I asked a few questions at the annual board meeting, and the next thing I knew, I was elected to the board. So I served as a board member starting in the fall of 2018, and then became the president a year later in 2019 when John Pritchard stepped aside to do other things for Triangle. The one of the things that is important for us is that we purchased a almost new house at Iowa State in June of 2018 from Sigma Chi. And our actual original house on Highland was purchased from Sigma Chi. So that's kind of ironic, but that's the facts. And so the house was a 50-man house. We purchased it for $4.665 million. So it's a major investment on the part of the alumni. And one of the things that we did is we had a capital campaign, and we've paid that $4.665 million liability down to $2 million today, less than 3 years later. So we had a very successful capital campaign. We have some very generous alumni. And so financial responsibility to the alumni owners of the House Corporation is a key part of my responsibility, but it's also to make sure that we operate soundly financially, as well as build the chapter from, we went into the house with 21 men in the house, 31 today, and on our way to having 45 to 47 men living in house. And so we attempt to assist the active chapter leadership team, Tyler and his guys, in any way appropriate. And they do a good job. There's always a lot going on. We worry about facilities and try to continue to improve the facility so that it's the top technological fraternity house at Iowa State. And those are the key things that we're involved in.
Great, thank you. Tyler, first of all, congratulations on being elected as the chapter president. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well as the chapter's executive team? Each Triangle's executive team looks a little bit different. So I think kind of painting the picture of what your team looks like will just give a better background for where you guys are coming from.
Yeah. So I am a senior in anthropology with a minor in classical studies. So I'm not actually in STEM, as in like the engineering side of things, but I am on the Bachelor of Science side. I joined Triangle back in my freshman year, so fall of 2017. As for the chapter, we have 8 executive positions, myself as president. We have internal vice president who manages the judicial board and all the internal cabinets, so like the brotherhood chair, the scholarship chair. Then we have the external vice president who handles all of our social media and the external. So we're thinking like philanthropy chairs and all of them. Then we have finance, who obviously handles the money, operations, which is our secretarial position, recruitment, house, and we have a brand new VP of academics that we actually just created at last meeting on Monday. So we don't even have anyone in that position yet. We're looking forward to.
Great. Thank you guys for just sharing a little bit about your background, giving some context to where we're coming from today. Trevor, I'm going to go to you next. And you're not only the live-in advisor, but you support specific undergraduate leaders. Can you tell us about the officers that you directly support, as well as some of the rationale for why those officers are best supported by you in the live-in advisor role?
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. I oversee or advise all of the positions that would fall kind of in the internal cabinet. So I work most closely with the internal vice president for the chapter and members of his cabinet. So that includes the scholarship chair, that includes the risk manager, that includes the new member educator, in any other position that would fall into kind of that internal realm and kind of fall into some of those internal chapter operations. And then I also work closely with the vice president of house management. And so making sure that the house operates smoothly. So if there is a maintenance issue, making sure that we're getting that resolved quickly. I specifically kind of oversee what chapter officers are doing for goal-wise, and making sure that they're meeting their objectives that keep the chapter operating and soundly, right? So my influence is to ask those questions of, does this decision make sense for the chapter? Does this move the chapter forward? Can we rethink this? Asking some of those bigger questions. In addition to supporting individual chapter officers, I attend all chapter meetings and exec meetings. So asking those bigger questions of the exec team and making sure that processes are followed appropriately, and that everything remains kind of in check in terms of exec and chapter meetings. So I really let the students run the show, and then usually ask those bigger questions, or if something doesn't quite make sense, or I don't think that something is efficient, I might chime in to say, hey, let's rethink this, or are we sure we want to move forward with that? Not trying to create too much influence, but making sure that, as Dave would typically say, there's an adult in the room to make sure that decisions are made that are appropriate. And I think the rationale for serving internal officers is that I'm here. And so some of those internal processes and some of those things that happen inside the chapter, I can be there quickly or can jump in. So for example, for new member education, I've worked closely with the new member educator in the past, and still do. But last semester during new member education, we built a plan. He built a plan and I offered my perspective on it and offered some coaching on that, and was able to add some perspective that I know the alumni board wanted to see from new member education. And so I think to start, I attended a handful of those new member education meetings to make sure that officer was supported and that he felt like he had everything that he needed, and then kind of stepped back and let him be in charge of that. So my role is really to, I would say, put in some bumpers. And if anybody kind of falls into the gutter, it's like, all right, let's pull them back out. Let's set them up with their next 3 steps so that they can keep moving forward.
I love that, Trevor. Thank you for sharing. Dave, can you tell us a little bit about why the alumni board really started the conversation and moved toward bringing in a skilled live-in advisor, really one that has an experience with fraternal organizations already?
Yeah, absolutely. So we moved into the house in August of 2018. We had 21 men move in, and move into a house that holds 45 to 47. And so we were under what we wanted to be in terms of the number of men in the house. And so we're in a building mode. So in our first year, actually our first fall in the house, we had a couple members that had mental health issues, mental health crisis, if you will. And so we knew that we needed students come to Iowa State, whether they live in a dorm or an apartment or a fraternity, and they all come with different backgrounds and different experiences. But to put 20 men in a house that many of them had not met each other before, they all bring something different. And we felt that there needed to be someone a little older with a little more experience. When I was at Iowa State, we had a house mother. She was a very nice lady. She was 65 years old. People would go in and watch TV with her and talk to her, and she was just a wonderful individual, but she was like a grandmother to us, okay? And she did not help coach or counsel or solve problems in the chapter. And so we wanted a younger person that wasn't just an adult in the room, but could actually play a role to coach and counsel and help through any kinds of challenging issues. And just, the men that come to Iowa State Triangle, make dramatic changes in their life during those 4 or 5 or 6 years in the case of some, that they're at Iowa State. And we want to provide personal development opportunities to those individuals. And we just felt it was appropriate to find someone that understood fraternities and sororities, that had counseled their chapter or chapters in a past role, that were young enough to relate to the members, but a little older so that they could leverage their life experiences. And so we were fortunate to find Trevor to fill that role.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. Trevor, back to you. We know that there's a lot that goes into being an effective live-in advisor, and you talked a little bit about some of the specifics that you do on a daily basis. And I think a lot of people that are probably going to view this recording will want to know, well, what should we ask of the live-in advisor? What should they be doing? Can you tell us a little bit? Every day is different, I know that, but can you tell us a little bit about some of the specifics that you do as a live-in advisor working directly with the undergraduate members?
Yeah, Carrie, I think like you said, every day looks a little bit different. And so sometimes it's you're showing up to a chapter meeting and it's part of the routine. And then other days you're having someone knock on your door at 2 a.m. to say like, hey, I'm not doing well in this class and I really need some advice on how I should move forward. Or I'm having an argument with my significant other and I just need some perspective. I think with COVID-19, it's also put another layer to being a live-in advisor. So are all of our members following COVID-19 guidelines? Do members feel safe in the facility, and making sure that if we are going to have procedures for COVID, that people are following those, and that someone is able to step in and say like, hey, I know that this isn't great, but this is what is expected of us. And I think that the chapter leadership also does a really, really great job in being a team player to make sure that those policies are followed. But I try to meet with chapter officers that I oversee monthly, but we meet every week at exec for many of the officers that I work with. But on a monthly basis, I'll meet with them. And then Tyler and I meet every week before exec. We talk about his upcoming week and ways that I might need to support him or ways that he might need to loop in another officer. And every week is different. And so sometimes we set the goals and Tyler will meet those goals and we're able to move forward. And then other times Tyler's putting out fires that he needs to attend to. But I would also say that the position is different every day. So, for example, this week, we know that event registration has to happen at the institution level and at the IFC level. And we noticed that a few of our chapter officers were not following those event procedures correctly. And they were not meeting. There's a 14-day, every institution is different. So, but since I work in the Office of Sorority and Fraternity Engagement, I was able to, set aside time with officers to say, hey, this is the event registration procedure. We can't submit events like 2 or 3 days ahead of time. We have to follow the 14-day minimum to submit these events. And so let me walk you through what that process looks like so that you know and have the background in order to do that. So that was I think that's an example of, that's not maybe a regular thing that I do, but we noticed something that needed to be changed or something that the chapter was dealing with, and we were able to host that. So I think it's about just being like a supporter and saying like, hey, like, I know that you're going through this and I want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable. I try to leave my door open when I'm here working on homework or kind of watching TV. And I think a lot of guys will stop in and just say, hey, how's it going, Trev? What have you been up to? What's going on? I also have a dog. So when my board was gracious enough to allow me to get a dog that lives in my apartment. So I bring her to chapter meetings and guys come in and want to see the dog. And so I think that's helped a lot with rapport. but just try and be a friend, but also someone that can ask those bigger questions.
Great. Yeah, Trevor, I think there's a significance to you having some institutional knowledge on policies and procedures as a graduate student who's working in the sorority and fraternity office, and that lends to some big assistance when you see the undergraduates not quite complying with those policies or procedures, that you can step in because you have that institutional knowledge. So I really like that you brought that up. Dave, as the alumni group president, can you explain a little bit about the relationship that you have with Trevor, that your group has with Trevor? Essentially, how do you guys collaborate and work together for this ultimate goal of supporting the undergraduates?
Absolutely. So we have a set of high-level objectives that the alumni is interested in achieving. We want our chapter to compete at the highest level on grade point average. And so as an example, because of our growth, we have upperclassmen that have figured out how to get good grades. The youngsters, the pledges, the new members are usually the ones that are most challenged, depending upon what high school environment they came in from. They may come and they may pledge, and the next thing you know, they failed a course or about to fail a course. And so Trevor plays a great role in working with, I guess we would say, the scholarship chair and the individual that might need some personal tutoring or coaching, whatever. So he's a resource for the chapter, and he's also a resource for the alumni. So I talk to Trevor, I want to say, every other week. And he sits in on our monthly alumni board meeting. And so I talk to Trevor 2 or 3 times a month on things that require attention, but we don't, we don't look closely every day, every week at what's going on. We trust Tyler to do his job, and we trust Trevor to do his. And we have a leadership consultant, Quinn Moran, that also focuses on recruitment and works with a few of the other officers to complement what Trevor does. And so we try to divide and conquer and set high level objectives, and then let everybody do their job. And everybody's always free to raise their hand and ask a question or say, I have a problem. We have a pretty big operation. It's a 20,000 square foot 6-year-old building, but it gets cold in the winter in Ames, Iowa. And so pipes have frozen in the past. We've had water heaters that kept kicking off, and most of our guys like to take hot showers as opposed to cold showers. And so Trevor works with the house manager to make sure, and we have an alumni that's responsible for our facilities. And so between the house man, Trevor, and our committee lead on the facility, they work, and we've done a lot of work to improve the facility. We implemented a new gigabit internet, or Ethernet, I should say. We've installed a new firewall technology to speed up the ability to have a lot of guys on the internet at one time with virtual classes. We're putting in new Wi-Fi access points, and we've got projects lined up that Trevor is very instrumental in helping us coordinate, getting contractors in, and working with the house man. At the end of the day, we want our membership to be happy, to be healthy, academically successful, and to have a true brotherhood, so that they end up with lifelong friendships in Triangle like I have. And we're just committed to our success, and we just have a great partnership in place with Trevor and Tyler and the active leadership team.
Yeah, awesome. Your guys' collaboration and ability to work together for success and not in separate silos really speaks to the overall progress that you guys have been able to make over the recent years. Trevor, I know that bringing someone new into a space that is really comfortable for members, right? The fraternity house is their home. It's where they gather and congregate and share in brotherhood and experience with one another. But coming into a space like that for you may not always be the easiest. Can you tell us a little bit about your strategy for getting to know the brothers and chapter leaders, and what really led to you having a solid relationship with them today? I know that probably took some time and energy, effort to gain that trust. That's really needed for a productive relationship on all sides.
Yeah, I think I had a unique experience, I think, to start, right? Because I worked with the chapter's executive team to implement COVID policies during the summer before I was able to start in the position officially. And so I think that allowed me to build some rapport with the executive team. I also worked closely with the previous chapter president, just on like a texting basis to kind of say, hey, what's going on with this? What are we doing? And so I think it really started at the executive team level to make sure that they knew who I was. They knew that they could come to me. And I think it wasn't perfect at first, and I don't think it'll ever be perfect. I think that every person in the chapter feels like at a different level. I'm not a triangle member, and so there are things that like the chapter will talk about or that participate in that I don't have those conversations with them out of respect for the organization. And so I think it comes down to me identifying what space is a brotherhood space that brothers really want that one-on-one time and can have that companionship, and then what spaces do I need to step in, and when is it appropriate for me to attend? So typically when there's a brotherhood event or something that I would classify as like a brotherhood experience, I will pop in and say, hey everyone, how we doing? And then kind of leave at that point and just make sure that they have that brotherhood time to be brothers. I try and keep my door open, like I said earlier, so that people feel comfortable. Like if my door is open, they're welcome to step in. They're also welcome to knock. I get a lot of knocks on my door, and that's totally fine, right? That's my role. And so, but I think at the start, it was just saying like, hey, everyone, like I'll be in the house from these times. So every Sunday from this time to this time, like this is dedicated triangle time. You're welcome to pop in and say hi at other times. And so I put a schedule on my door that says like, I'm in class at this time. I'm at my assistantship on campus at this time. And then I'm definitely going to be in the house at these times. And so if there's anything that you need specifically, these are the times that you can do that. But I'm also in a lot of the chapter's group chats. So the chapter uses Slack as their method of communication, and I'm in a few of the channels with members. And so sometimes that means like sending a funny TikTok that I think members will laugh at. Other times it's just putting a little react to say that I saw the message. And then I try every evening to do rounds through the facility. So some folks will leave their doors open, others will leave them shut. But if I hear like everyone kind of laughing, I might knock on the door and say, hey, what's up? Like, what are we laughing at? What's going on? But I think it's about recognizing the spaces that are brotherhood spaces and that are kind of like sacred, and that, we don't want the advisor here to be part of this. And then other times when it's like, yeah, come on in, we're ready to laugh and talk about things. So, but again, I don't think that it is perfect. And I don't think that it happened overnight. I think it really, I started at the end of July, early August, and I wouldn't say that I knew everyone well enough to say that like I knew them until October, and really just spending some different time with different folks to say, this is who I am, this is who you are, this is the active role that you play in the chapter, as whether it's in a position or whether it's just as an active member, because I think everyone plays a role in the chapter's culture. But there are folks that I have a more professional relationship with, and then I think there are other folks that I can laugh and joke around with, and just being able to identify that.
Yeah, thank you. Tyler, we haven't heard from you for a while, so I've got a question for you. And I think that this is on a lot of groups' minds as they think about bringing in a live-in advisor who has the skill and the resource and the experience like Trevor does. but they may not be a Triangle member. Can you talk to us a little bit about the dynamic that you were able to create with Trevor, even though he's not a member of Triangle, but he's still a fraternity man?
Trevor kind of touched on this a little bit in his last topic. He did come in last semester over the summer. I was actually also on the executive team back then as the internal vice president. So we worked closely together for a long time. I think overall, Trevor has become this kind of just older brother who just isn't allowed in close chapter, really, because we all operate under IFC and like the word of fraternity. So while we're not in the same fraternity per se, we still kind of share all those common values, at the very least, the 5 pillars of the IFC community. And I think that dynamic has really been created because of the open and honest communication that we've tried to strive to create with each other, whether it's just like a simple issue I'm going through just as a person, or if it's more of a, hey, this just happened, we need to deal with it, I need your help, I need you to be on board here with me. And I think through those different small interactions just consistently happening all the time, we've become really close.
Thank you. I think that goes a long way, right? Like we're all part of this movement together. We're trying to help shape and change the lives of our fraternal membership, and I appreciate you for sharing that. Dave, how did you go about starting the process of finding a live-in advisor? And now that you've gone through that process, do you have any pointers for those that may be looking to find someone with some background experience in the fraternal world, to come and be their live-in advisor?
Sure. So the first thing that we did is we took a few minutes to identify what our requirements were. We wanted someone that could be a coach and a counselor. We wanted someone that could relate, so certain age range, younger, if you will, maybe a couple years out of university. We wanted somebody that had the fraternity background. And in Trevor's case, he'd been a leadership or educational consultant for Lambda Chi Alpha chapter. Did I get that backwards? Alpha, Trevor?
You got it. Lambda Chi Alpha.
Okay. And for their chapters in a regional responsibility. And so we came up with our requirements, and then we started just talking to people. And we were fortunate. I think Trevor is a fraternity brother of Jim Phillips at our headquarters office, who's one of our recruitment specialists. And so I believe Quinn Moran actually told us about Trevor because she's friends with Jim. And sorry about the background noise, but we just reached out to people that we knew. And if that hadn't happened, we were lucky. My advice would be to agree on what your requirements are. Trevor is a graduate student, so he was going to be at Iowa State for a purpose. He actually also has a responsibility with sorority and fraternity engagement as part of the Dean of Students office and works with sororities on campus. And so he understands the Greek system and the challenges and the opportunities. And then we have a every other month bi-monthly alumni newsletter. We didn't get to the point of having to put it in there, but I would have. If your university Greek system has a Greek Alumni Alliance Facebook page, I would advertise there. And just and then obviously reach out to the sorority and fraternity engagement office, because I think our SFE exec was also aware of Trevor, and that he was coming to Iowa State and was looking for this kind of an assignment. So, the secret is just use different sources to get the word out. And hopefully you can find the right person. But Trevor fit our requirements actually perfectly, and our experience has been great, very, very positive. So couldn't speak more highly.
Thanks, Dave. I always say when groups are looking for a live-in advisor, I always do the quickest Google search to see if there's a graduate program in higher education student affairs, because traditionally you're going to be able to find a well-suited candidate with someone who probably has some experience working with fraternal members or traveling as a leadership consultant like Trevor did. Those graduate programs are really just a plethora of people that may fit that criteria, like you were talking about, Dave.
So that's great advice. I did not know to do that.
Yeah, that's what my graduate degree is in, and I'm pretty sure, Trevor, you're doing yours in higher education student affairs, something along those lines. Trevor, you assisted facilitating an officer transition retreat during this past election cycle. Can you tell us a little bit about that process, as well as some of the key benefits that you've seen really in action as a result of a structured transition program, which I think a lot of our chapters are wanting to do. They just aren't sure how to execute it, who should support in the execution of that kind of transition period.
Yeah, I think we definitely learned a lot through the transition retreat. I noticed that the chapter in previous, they have like officer guides and officer guidebooks, so and like how to do every position. And I noticed that it was, the semester would end in previous, and it would be, okay, transition the outgoing officer, have this incoming officer come in, and then the exec team will meet for the first time. And I really wanted to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to meet with the outgoing officer, and that the outgoing team and the incoming team could have a meeting about where they thought the chapter was at in terms of like chapter culture, chapter goal setting, and really things that they wanted to focus on for the future. And so in my role, in addition to the position guides that already existed, I asked the outgoing chapter officers to complete a goal sheet or a transition sheet that says, like, these are the things that I do on a weekly, monthly, semesterly basis. These are things that I think I did really, really well in the position. These are things that I think should definitely continue, or things that I wish I would have done differently, and facilitated just conversations between officers. And then they were able to have conversations about, well, what should my budget look like? What should I set my goals for? And then they reported those goals back to me as an advisor, and to Tyler as chapter president. And then we really spent some time thinking about, like, what is the purpose of the chapter? What should the chapter be doing as a unit to move forward? Like, what is the mission, and what are the overarching goals? And so an example of that is the chapter really wants to be more engaged on campus and fill some of these campus spaces, which I think the chapter has done an excellent job. There are 3 members of the chapter that are serving on IFC roles right now. There are folks taking the sorority and fraternity leadership class. And so that the chapter is definitely moving toward that. And I think some of those pieces were already in place before we set that goal, but I think it gave us something to look back on, particularly now as we're almost halfway through the semester, to say, great, have we been able to meet this, or are we on track to meet this overarching semester annual goal to say that we want to be more involved on campus and more of a face and representative of Triangle and the IFC and sort of fraternity community as a whole. And so I think it was about getting the outgoing team together to talk about, like, what we did great, what we think we should improve. And so using that experience to be able to help build the future, but also letting everyone that is incoming say, like, this is what I think should happen, because they wanted to have like that autonomy, or that piece of, like, I want to create influence, but allowing those outgoing folks to also have that say. And so I think that was the goal. And I think we learned a lot too. I think that this is the first time the chapter had done something like this in a while. And so I think that we definitely took some notes for next year. We did it almost a full day. And I think that was a little bit long for the chapter. And I think that there were some things that I didn't know the chapter had already talked about, or kind of had goals to strive for, that I wasn't aware of, just as kind of like almost like a third party that's involved, but not always involved in every conversation. So I think we learned a lot about what my role could look like in the incoming group, because the culture and norms had already been set in the exec team that I kind of joined, I guess, in a way. And then this one was new and forming, and I was able to kind of be there from the start. And so I think I think a couple different pockets of what that meant for the chapter and what that means for the chapter now.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I think a large part is just creating the space for incoming and outgoing officers to be able to share their past experiences, where they see the chapter thriving in the future and moving towards. So I appreciate you for kind of creating that space for them, a structured space for them to have those conversations and work through kind of their future goals, future plans, aspirations, as a cohesive unit. Tyler, as chapter president, you support a team of other chapter leaders. Can you talk a little bit about the guidance and support that you're able to get from Trevor to then turn and support your brothers in their specific areas of responsibility?
I would say that a lot of the guidance I get from Trevor is from the conversations that we have together. And usually it's more of a talking through the problem with him and him kind of poking me and prodding me in a few different directions, kind of trying to help me find the solution and also just bouncing ideas off of each other. And so I've really tried to use that to have those types of conversations with my executive team and kind of help them see solutions that they just haven't noticed yet, even though they might be just in front of their faces. I've also kind of tried to have more of the open door policy similar to Trevor. I haven't found that to be as successful, unfortunately. I don't have a dog. Maybe that might help, Dave. We can talk about that later.
No more dogs.
But he's also been really helpful in identifying some things that I'm not seeing. Like I don't always see when a person is struggling in their positions because I don't have those as frequent meetings with them that he does. And he's also really helped me identify that and take the proactive steps to see the need and find and help the need in the other members.
Oh, I love that. I love proactive work.
Mhm.
It makes everyone's life a little bit easier moving forward. Thank you, Tyler. Dave, I want to be really transparent with the folks that are viewing this recording and what it looks like to bring on a live-in advisor, one with a skill set to match that criteria that the group has, and really assist the undergraduates in advancing to meet their goals, meet the goals of the alumni. Can you talk to us a little bit about the financial obligations that are involved with bringing on a live-in advisor?
Absolutely. They're actually very simple. So Trevor's a graduate student going to school full-time. He also works for the Sorority and Fraternity Engagement Organization. And then he's our house director. So our financial arrangement with Trevor is straightforward. He has a house director suite, a 1-bedroom apartment, bedroom, keep me honest here, Trevor, living room area, kind of a little kitchen area. So it's a nice 1-bedroom suite. We pay Trevor $1,500 a semester for financial compensation, and then he obviously gets the meal service that we have. Our guys love the Greek House Chefs organization that cooks for us, and so that's part of it. So room, board, the food service, and then $1,500 a semester for financial compensation.
Great, thank you. Where I've got a couple of questions as we wrap up that I want everyone to chime in with. We'll do the same order that we did at the beginning, Dave, then Trevor, then Tyler. My first question is there anything that we didn't cover that we think is important for those tuning in to know about as their groups maybe ponder the idea of bringing in an advisor to live in the chapter facility and serve as that additional layer of support for the active members?
So my advice and vision would be that Iowa State Triangle would always have a live-in advisor. We wouldn't even have to rethink it as long as I'm involved on the alumni board. just a couple thoughts. No one could have predicted the pandemic and the resulting pressure on students from having to deal with virtual learning instead of going to class, the stress about getting the high academic success that we want, having an uncertainness about the grades and so forth being virtual. The lack of social interaction takes a toll on people that I don't think we measure and sometimes think about enough. And so having a live-in advisor has helped, I think, manage through. We had a very successful management of the virus and the protections that we take. We've not had any positive cases in the house, and a lot of houses have had a lot of positive cases. So our guys, the chapter has done a great job, and Tyler was a steadying influence in the policy that they came up with. And then the second thing I would mention is the officers transition 1st of January each year. And so we talked briefly about it, but the continuity of Trevor being able to work with the exec board in the transition from the fall semester to the spring semester. So this year, Iowa State made some changes, and there was a full 2-month break from November 25th to January 25th when school started again. So the transition took place on January 1 or January 2, but we didn't get to class, for another almost 4 weeks. And so things have to happen. Things need to be repaired in the house. If they break, there's got to be communication, and Trevor played an important role in that transition. So it's just great to have him.
Great, thank you. Trevor, anything to add that we just haven't touched on yet that you think is important?
I would say if you are considering, maybe you're watching this and you're considering, maybe you want to be a live-in advisor for a Triangle chapter. I would say one of the learning curves that I experience is that every Triangle chapter is different. And there isn't necessarily a national way of doing everything. And so that has been a learning curve for me. And so being able to create that influence to say, hey, I know we created this. Does this make sense for everyone? The chapter had conversations of like adding someone to the executive team for academics. And I know academics is an important role for the chapter right now. And so they wrote the policy and they added that. And I think that was a really great move. And I honestly say, I don't think I had a huge role in that. I said, hey, that sounds like a good idea. I think you should do that. And they did. I would also say like, don't force it. Relationships aren't going to happen overnight. And I think when I first started, I was like, oh, I don't think that I know everyone yet, or I don't think that I am doing a great job of building these relationships. But I think by like October, right, things just kind of fall into place. And so I would say it takes time to build relationships. It takes time to have that investment from everyone. And so that's okay. Be comfortable with the uncomfortable at first.
Absolutely, especially right now, and everything is just so abnormal. I could see building that solid base as leaning into that uncomfortable place. Tyler, anything that you'd like to add from your perspective that we haven't touched on quite yet?
I'd say it's really unmeasurable the amount of value you can get from having a third person perspective be there and in all of your processes. It's very easy to get stuck in your traditionalist ways when you're just kind of doing your chapter life, and having somebody who's also been in a fraternity and go, oh, I see you're doing this. This is how we did this. I think your way is better. Or I think you might be able to incorporate a few things, a few different ideas that we would never think of because we're happy in how we do things, even though they may not be the best. So I think that is really invaluable.
Great, thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit about some key successes that you guys have had that we can really attribute to having this more structured live-in advisor role. Dave, can you provide any insight on success that you're seeing from your perspective?
Well, I think all the successes that we've had are team efforts. And so Trevor plays a role, the active exec team plays a role, Quinn Moran, our leadership consultant, plays a role, the alumni play a very small role, but the chapter was selected as chapter of the year last year within Triangle of all the chapters, and we're very proud of that accomplishment. It's an ongoing effort. It's a journey, and things didn't change when we received that award. We continue to build. The success that's important as the alumni president is that we build the house in terms of the active membership, living in the house, leading the house, and just simply being brothers. And so we've started in the fall of 18 with 21 men in house. We're at 30 today, on our way. We just pledged 5 new men. We expect to pledge 5 more. And so growth and financial strength is a key thing for the alumni. And we want the chapter to have a successful ongoing recruitment, but we don't want recruitment of men for the sake of recruitment. We want quality men that have an ability to lead and grow while they're at Iowa State, and take on different responsibilities within the university and within the chapter, and develop themselves so that when they graduate, they have job offers that they have hard time deciding which one they want to take. They have so many good ones, and they just leave Iowa State feeling like it was the greatest 4 or 5 years of their life, and then make a few lifelong or make many lifelong friends in the process.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. Trevor, any of those successes that you want to touch on from your perspective?
No, I think the biggest thing is in the fall, I think it really is a team effort, particularly with COVID-19. We were really proud to not have any COVID cases in the facility in the fall. And I think that goes to say about, one, the chapter culture that exists and that did exist before I kind of got here, to say that, we're going to respect policy, we're going to respect each other. And so when we implemented COVID policies, I would say that everyone was in that as a team effort. But when we did have a few run-ins with, like, maybe there was some exposure, I think we acted quickly to follow our plan and to make sure that everyone was notified and that those members were put in a space where they may not put others at risk. And I think that is a huge success. But I would really say that the success that the chapter sees is really student driven. And I just play a small piece in supporting the well-being of members here in the facility, and I think the well-being of the exec team in goal completion. So I think overall it's really student driven, and I'm just able to add some of that perspective or say, hey, what's going on with that? So
Definitely. Well, let's hear from a student. Tyler, what success do you have to speak on?
I would say the successes has been through the additions of more formalized goal setting and reviewing those goals and where you are at them. Because I know we have had issues in the past of people who've had positions and then they just didn't really do anything with them because we didn't have any formalized check-in processes. And they may have had those issues not because of their own, but because the issues of the position themselves. I think we've really been striving to improve each position through those goals and through seeing what needs to be done. That way we can be a lot more proactive, like we said earlier.
Great, thank you. And I think that we'd be remiss if we paint a picture of perfection and success. Trevor, I know that you said this will never be perfect, and that's true. And I think that to stay in that transparency piece, have there been any challenges along the way? And if so, can you just talk a little bit about how as a team you were able to work through those challenges to overcome?
Sure. I think as an advisor, you want to be able to create influence, but you don't want to over influence and you don't want to be biased in your influence. And I think that sometimes has been a struggle of saying, like, hey, I was kind of involved in this and I want to make sure that the active chapter makes this decision, the active chapter follows their procedures, and that I do not create too much influence in this. And so I think that is one of the things that we've had to, I guess, just check in on and see, hey, does this make sense? Is this correct? I think that's been a struggle. I also think like there are procedures and policies and things that are set in place that maybe aren't going to change overnight or aren't going to change in a semester or even in a year. And I think I've had to come in and say, okay, great. Like, I think an example is like, I don't think they should have chapter in their dining room. I think it should be in the recreation room. But I can't change that. And so that's my opinion, but that doesn't have any operational problems. And so like, it's like, okay, cool. Well, like, I'm not going to create influence to change that because that's the way that it is. And it's not causing any harm. And I will say, like, you know, I have opinions and I try and like keep those respectful and I try and keep those sometimes to myself. And I think I don't always agree with members and the decisions that they make, whether it's chapter related or not related. And so I think keeping those to myself and saying like, hey, I'm going to support you no matter what. And I'm going to support you as a human and as a man. So just trying to be that unbiased person in the facility, but also build those relationships and trying to draw that fine line of we're friends and we're supporters and we can hang out and like laugh together, but at the same time we need to maintain a professional relationship that moves us forward.
Emily, thank you, Trevor. Dave, anything to add on the point of challenges and overcoming those challenges?
No, we really don't have many challenges. Actually, you want to talk about this week's challenges or last week's challenges?
Right.
So, sure. So the key is to have a positive relationship so that you can deal with the situations, whether, you know, it's facilities related or people related. We've had a few conflict resolution issues the last few weeks that have been challenging for the men to get through. So the men had to work it out. Trevor was a guide. I attempted to be a guide. But when you get 30 or 35 people living in the same facility, you know, not everybody has the same perspective. And so part of the growth process is to understand and discuss and confront in a positive way any issues and work through them. That's what a family does. That's what we are. We're a family. It's not a dorm. It's not an apartment. At the beginning of the day and the end of the day, these guys go to bed and they're friends, and they have a responsibility to each other to communicate and help make each other better, understand each other's perspectives, and push forward with the same set of goals and priorities that the group has as a group, not necessarily just as the individuals in the group. So yeah, we have challenges every week, and you just have to tackle them and realize that these things are going to happen, and sometimes they're more serious than other times, but that's normal. And you know, when we get to 45 or 47 men in the house, guess what? We're going to have a few more challenges, but that just comes with the territory. So these guys do a real good job at working things through, even though at the time it may seem this is a mess, but you know, you find a way and collect information and gather the facts and resolve it and talk through it and move forward. So
Great, thank you, Dave. Tyler, anything to add from your perspective as chapter president?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is be able to respectfully disagree. You know, we may have those differences in opinions, and it can be really difficult to express those because you don't want to have that friction, but you need it. You need to have that friction so that way you're able to get all the opinions, see all the sides, able to step away from it and then come back together. I know one issue we had was a few weeks ago. I really wanted to do a lot. I was in the mood. I wanted to get everything done that week, and Trevor had to go, Tyler, you have too much on your plate right now. You need to delegate all these things. And so We compromised. I delegated about half of them. You know, I got the other half mostly done. But I think being able to just have those conversations.
Tyler, the arts of delegation.
Mhm.
It is an art, and one that you will grow great skill in from your role as chapter president, hopefully. Last question for the group, and as we close out, just talk about the one thing that in your role, from your perspective, that you would want to tell another group. So Dave, what would you tell another alumni group? Trevor, what would you tell someone who may be thinking about filling that chapter live-in advisor role? Tyler, a chapter president, what would you tell the opposite of you at a group, the equivalent to you at a group who is thinking about bringing in a skilled live-in advisor, but they haven't quite made that final decision yet?
My advice would be to make sure that you understand what you're trying to accomplish so that you've got a profile and a set of requirements on if you do this, what are the goals? And then once you agree on that, I would say get one, but get the right person. And you're better off with an open position than the wrong person in the position. So don't make a mistake in your selection. And then once you have an advisor, work with the chapter president, the advisor, to set the high level, agree on what the high level priorities are, and then let people do their jobs. We inspect what we expect as an alumni organization. Our alumni treasurer works closely with the active treasurer. I talk to Tyler and Trevor and Quinn on a regular basis, but not every week, probably every other week. And, you know, we let them do their jobs and go to class and get grades and have a little fun. And the other thing that I would encourage anybody else considering a house director is make sure that you solicit and get support from the alumni for the position and for the investment. It's not a large financial investment, it's an investment. The bigger investment is having someone in the house to fill the role. And so I would strongly encourage anybody that has the ability to have a live-in house director to do it, assuming that you've got your goals clarified, if you will. So
Awesome. Thank you, Dave.
Mhm.
Trevor?
I would only offer you have to like students. You have to like being around them. You're going to live with them. You're going to have to be able to recognize that sometimes students aren't going to meet their goals or aren't going to do what they need to do. And you have to be able to be the one that says like, hey, you need to do this, or like our facility won't operate or the chapter won't operate. And so thankfully, like I really enjoy spending time with students. I'm totally fine to have someone knock on my door at 1 a.m. To say, hey, I need help with this. But know that like sometimes that responsibility is going to be yours if you take on a role like this. And you have to be okay with that, because if you close yourself off and set too hard of boundaries, then I think it would be a challenging position to have, but it's okay to have certain boundaries.
Yeah, Trevor, I love that. You've definitely got to be a student-centered person, which is why I always suggest going in and seeing if your university has that higher education student affairs program, because you're not going to go into that program if you are too keen on working with students, because that's what the program sets you up for, right? So thanks for sharing that, Trevor. Tyler, last up on this, what's your one thing that you want to share?
I'd say that towards another chapter president, it could be very lonely at the top. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot of expectations, and it's really valuable to have somebody who's at like a separate equal level as you that can help you carry that burden when it does come to be a little bit too much to be able to balance with everything else that you might also be having to do as a student, as having a job, or even just as a family member.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you guys so much for sharing a little bit about your story, where you came from, how you've been progressing, the success that you guys have been having, and I really hope that it resonates with some of our other groups that are thinking about implementing a live-in advisor to help support, guide, mentor, coach our collegiate members. So thank you guys.
Carrie, I would make my contact information available if anybody has
Yeah.
questions. Just feel free to reach out, and I'm sure Trevor and Tyler feel the same way.
Definitely, we'll link that information whenever we share this video recording out. Thank you guys.
Thanks
Yeah,
for having us.
Carrie,
Thanks for
go
having us.
Cyclones.